Welcome, everyone. We are live tonight. And pardon my tardiness, but I was speaking with good friends. So I'm glad to be here and I'm glad that you are here. And tonight is chapter 5 from the Law and the Promise. Oh, yes, indeed it is. Let me just make sure all my volumes are up. Tonight, listen, I trust everyone had a good day. Shea butter. Oh. Hey, girl. Hey, Cyber. Listen, I trust that everyone had a great day today, that you were productive. I learned a lot. Listen, I cannot wait for you to hear tomorrow's message because we're going to make the laws a little bit. We're going to chew the law up. Like, okay, don't be grossed out, but my grandmother had false teeth, but she loved roasted corn. Now, you never had roasted corn unless you grew up in the Caribbean. You have to cook it over a flame and it kind of pops, but it gets charred, but it's cooked, right? So, like I said, don't get grossed out. She couldn't chew it with her dentures. So I, being the young whippersnapper, would chew that corn for her so she could have it. But I digress. So tomorrow's lesson, we're gonna be doing the same thing. I'm gonna chew up the law and make it nice and easy for you to digest because we are gonna be talking about mm, something that most of us use in this day and age. But you see, we seem to think that the law is so far fetched, that the law is so. Cyber. We seem to think the law is so far fetched and, oh, we can't apply that to everyday life. Well, I'm going to show you tomorrow. So you want to be here for that where I can chew it up and pre-digest it for you so that you can assimilate it for yourself. And with that being said, chapter 5, subtle threads. William Blake said, all you behold, though it appears without, it is within. In your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. Shall I say it again? All you behold, though it appears without, it is within. In your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. William Blake. Nothing appears or continues in being by a power of its own. Events happen because comparatively stable imaginal activities created them. What? Events happen because comparatively stable imaginal activities created them, and they continue in being by virtue of the support they receive from such imaginal activities. The part which imagining the wish fulfilled plays in consciously creating circumstances is obvious in this series of stories. You will see how the telling of one story of the successful use of imagination can serve as a spur and a challenge to others to try it and see. Oh, one night, a gentleman rose in my audience. He said that he had no question to ask, but would like to tell me something. And this was his story. When he came out of the armed forces around World War II, he got a job that gave him take home pay of $25 a week. Say what now? $25 a week. After 10 years, he was making $600 a month. And at that time, he bought my book, Awakened Imagination, and read the chapter, The Pruning Shears of Revision. Through the daily practice of revision as set forth there, he was able to tell my audience 2 years later that his income was equal to that of the President of the United States. Oh, snap. In my audience sat a man who, by his confession, was broke. Oh, shoot. If you broke tonight, listen up. He had read the same book, but he suddenly realized he had done nothing with the use of his imagination to solve his financial problem. Sounds familiar. He decided he would try to imagine himself as the winner of the 510 pool at Caliente Racetrack. In his words, in this pool, one attempts to pick winners in the 5th through the 10th races. So, this is what I did. In my imagination, I stood sorting my tickets and feeling as I did so that I had each of the 6 winners. I enacted this scene over and over in my imagination until I actually felt goose pimples. And then I saw the cashier giving me a large sum of money, which I placed beneath my imaginary shirt. This was my entire imaginal drama. Now, I'm going to say it again what his imaginal drama was. So, this is what I did, he said. In my imagination, I stood sorting my tickets and feeling as I did so that I had each of the 6 winners. I enacted this scene over and over in my imagination until I actually felt goose pimples. And then I saw the cashier giving me a large sum of money, which I placed beneath my imaginary shirt. Remember, step 1, know what you want. To be the winner of the 510 pool at the Caliente racetrack. Step 2, in my imagination, I stood sorting my tickets and feeling as I did so that I had each of the 6 winners. I enacted this scene over and over in my imagination. Oh, step 3, I actually felt goose pimples. And then I saw the cashier giving me a large sum of money, which I placed beneath my imaginary shirt. This was my entire imaginal drama. And for 3 weeks, night after night, I enacted this scene and fell asleep. Fell asleep in the action. Oh, shades of Shea, yes. We are reading from The Law and the Promise by Neville Goddard. We are on chapter 5, Subtle Threads. So buckle up, Buttercup. So the man continues and he says, after 3 weeks, I traveled physically. What? I traveled physically to the Caliente racetrack. And on that day, every detail of my imaginative play was actually realized. The only change in the scene was that the cashier gave me a check for a total of $84,000 instead of currency. Well, cha-ching. Yes, Shades of Shea, live in the end. And that was written by TK. After my lecture, the night this story was told, a man in the audience asked me if I thought it was possible for him to duplicate TK's experience. In other words, somebody saying, wait, Neville, do you think I can do the same thing? Mhm. I told him he must decide the circumstances of his imaginal scene himself, but that whatever scene he chose, he must create a drama he could make natural to himself and imagine the end intently with all the feeling he could muster. He must not labor for the means to the end, but live imaginatively in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Oh. 1 month later, he showed me a check for $16,000, which he had won in another 510 pool at the same Caliente racetrack the previous day. This man had a sequel to his most interesting duplication of TK's good fortune. His first win took care of his immediate financial difficulties, although he wanted more money for future family security. Also, and more important to him, he wanted to prove that this had not been an accident. You see, he reasoned that if his good luck could happen a second time in succession, well, the so called law of percentages would give way to proof for him that his imaginal structures were actually producing this miraculous reality. And so he dared to put his imagination to a second test. And here's what he said: Neville, I wanted a sizable bank account, and this to me meant seeing a large balance on my bank statements. Therefore, in my imagination, I enacted a scene which took me into two banks. In each bank, I would see an appreciative smile meant for me from the bank manager as I walked into his establishment, and I would hear the teller's cordial greeting. I would ask to see my statement. In one bank, I saw a balance of $10,000. In the other bank, I saw a balance of $15,000. Wisdom Almighty. My imaginal scene did not end there. Immediately after seeing my bank balances, I would turn my attention to my horse racing system, which through a progression of 10 steps would bring my winnings to $11,533 with a starting capital of $200. I would divide the winnings into 12 piles on my desk. Counting the money in my imaginary hands, I would put $1,000 in each of the 11 piles and the remaining $533 in the last pile. You see, my imaginative accounting would amount to $36,533, including my bank balances. I enacted this entire imaginative scene each morning, afternoon, and night for less than 1 month. And on March the 2nd, I went to the Caliente track again. I made out my tickets, but strangely enough, and not knowing why I did so, I duplicated six more tickets exactly like the six already made out. But in the 10th selection, I made a mistake. A mistake. And copied two tickets twice. As the winners came in, I held two of them, each paying $16,423.50. I also had six consolation tickets, each paying $656.80. But hold on. The combined total amounted to $36,788. My imaginary accounting 1 month before had totaled $36,533. Now, 2 points of interest most profound to me were that by seeming accident, I had marked two winning tickets identically, and also that at the end of the ninth race, which was one of the major winners, the trainer attempted to scratch the horse. Eric, sorry, but the stewards denied the trainer's request. AJF. He wrote that letter. Now, Neville says, how subtle were the threads that led to his goal? Results must testify to our imagining, or we really are not imagining the end at all. AJF faithfully imagined the end, and all things conspired to aid his harvesting. His mistake in copying a winning ticket twice, and the steward's refusal to allow the trainer's request were events created by the imaginal drama to move the plan of things forward to its goal. So then, if you ask yourself, why am I not getting what I want? Results must testify to our imagining, or we really are not imagining the end. There's no shame in that, but check in for tomorrow's morning inspiration and you will understand why. You will understand why results must testify to our imagining, or we really aren't imagining the end at all. Hmm. Chance, wrote Belfort Bax, may be defined as that element in the reality change. That is, in the flowing synthesis of events, which is irreducible to law or the causal category. Chance may be defined as that element in the reality change, that is, in the following synthesis of events, which is irreducible to law or the causal category. So, in other words, Chance. We all know there's no such thing as chance. No such thing as chance. But if you really wanted to believe that there was chance, right? It is a change in reality. Oh my God, my life has changed. How fortuitous. How lucky am I? Nah, you changed, and that's what brought about the change in your reality, thereby looking like chance. So it flows in the synthesis of events. It flows to create the outward expression of the event. And you can only reduce it to what? The law or the causal category. But to live wisely, we must be aware of our imaginal activities, or at any rate, of the end which they are tending. We must see to it that it is the end we desire. Wise imagining identifies itself only with such activities that are of value or promise well. However, however much man seems to be dealing with a material world, he is actually living in a world of imagination. However much man seems to be dealing with a material world, living in a material, yeah, it's not material, it is a world of imagination. When he discovers that it is not the physical world of facts, but imaginal activities which shape his life, then the physical world will no longer be the reality, and the world of imagination will no longer be the dream. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end. Will the day's journey take the whole long day? From morn to night, my friend. You have to love how Neville Goddard waxes poetic. I think we have time to read chapter 6. Visionary fancy. The nature of visionary fancy or imagination is very little known, and the external nature and permanence of its ever existent images is considered as less permanent than the things of vegetative or generative nature. Yet, the oak dies as well as the lettuce, but its eternal image and individuality never dies, but renews by its seed. Just so the imaginative image returns by the seed of contemplative thought. Do you understand what he said? See, the oak and the lettuce may die, but they come back. Oh, how? By the seed. This is why Monsanto is so bad. It tries to defy the law. It makes all their seeds sterile. So you have to buy them year after year. But the nature of the seed is life itself. But that's another day. Don't let me get started. So he says, imaginative image returns by the seed of contemplative thought. So you keep planting whatever that seed is in your imagination, you keep reaping the same harvest, thereby giving it life time after time. Those are the words of William Blake. The images of our imagination are the realities of which any physical manifestation is only the shadow. Angela, can you say that again? The images of our imagination are the realities of which any physical manifestation is only the shadow. If we are faithful to vision, the image will create for itself the only physical manifestation of itself it has a right to make. In other words, you will reap what you have sown. You plant corn, you reap corn. So the image that you are faithful to will create for itself the only physical manifestation that it can make. That's why you don't have to force things to happen. Get the image, and life will give you back the image in material form. We speak of the reality of a thing when we mean its material substance. That is exactly what an imaginist means by its unreality or shadow. Imagining is spiritual sensation. Enter into the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Through spiritual sensation, through your use of imaginal sight, sound, scent, taste, and touch, you will give to your image the sensory vividness necessary to produce that image in your outer or shadow world. Remember, remember TK, who said when he did those tickets, he worked himself so much he felt the goose pimples of his reality of having won. So that was the sensory vividness of his imaginal act. Now, here's the story of one who was faithful to his vision, FB. Now, being a true imaginist, remembered what he had heard in his imagination, and thus, this is what he writes. He says, Neville, a friend who knows my passionate fondness for opera tried to get Kristen Flagstad's complete recording of Tristan and Isolde for me at Christmas, or Isolde. In over a dozen record stores, he was told the same thing. RCA Victor is not reissuing this recording, and there have been no copies available since June the 1st. Well, on December 27th, I determined to prove your principle again by getting the album I desired so intensely. Lying down in my living room, I mentally walked into a record shop I patronize and asked the one salesman whose face and voice I could recall, well, do you have the Flagstaff's complete Isolde? And he replied, well, yes, I have. And that ended the scene. And I repeated it until it was real to me. Remember the man with the goose pimples? And it was real to him, yeah? So FB is saying he repeated that scene. Do you have Flagstaff's complete Isolde? And the salesman said, well, yes, I have. That ended the scene. And I repeated it until it was real to me. Late that afternoon, I went to that record shop to physically enact the scene. Hmm. Not one detail supplied by the senses had encouraged me to believe I could walk out of that shop with those records. In other words, he was doubting. Well, I had been told last September by the same salesman in the same shop, the same story my friend had received there before Christmas. Approaching the salesman I had seen in my imagination that morning, I said, do you have Flagstaff's complete Isolde? And he replied, no, we have not. No, we have not. Without saying another thing audible to him, I said inwardly, that's not what I heard you say. As I turned to leave the shop, I noticed on a top shelf what I thought to be an advertisement of this set of records, and remarked to the salesman, if you don't have the merchandise, you shouldn't advertise it. Shots fired. And that's right, he replied. And as he reached up to take it down, he discovered he discovered it was a complete album with all 5 records. What's really going to get your goat is, was it always there this whole time? But I digress. The scene wasn't played exactly as I had constructed it, but the result confirmed what my imagined scene implied. Oh, how can I thank you, Neville? Signed FB. See, Cyber says, as an underground rap CD collector, I do this all the time. LOL. See how it is? After reading FB's letter, we must agree with Anthony Eden that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. FB's fancy fusing with the sense field of the record shop enriched aspects of it and made them his what he perceived. Our future is our imagining in its creative march. FB used his imagination for a conscious purpose, representing life as he desired it to be, and thereby affecting life instead of merely reflecting it. So what should we practice doing? We should practice doing what? Affecting life instead of reflecting it. So to affect life, you've got to be the man of imagination. And to reflect life, well, you live by your senses. Oh, I can see it, then it must be real. No, you can see it because it is real in your mind's eye. That's why you see it on the outside, but I digress. So sure was he that his imaginal drama was the reality and the physical act but a shadow, that when the salesman said, "No, we haven't got it," FB mentally said, "That's not what I heard you say." Oh, he not only remembered what he heard, but he was still remembering it. Imagining the wish fulfilled is the seeking that finds. It is the asking that receives. It is the knocking to which is opened. I have to say that again. But before I say it, I have to highlight it. Highlight. Imagining the wish fulfilled is the seeking that finds, the asking that receives, and the knocking to which is opened. He saw and heard what he desired to see and hear, and would not take "No, we don't have it" for an answer. Oh, Lord, Angela, if you are not fired up tonight. Ah. The imaginist dreams while awake. He is not the servant of his vision, but the master of the direction of his attention. Imaginative constancy controls perception of events in space time. Do it again. Being consistent in your imagination controls the perception of events in space and time. So, unfortunately, most men are, well, ever changing like a joyless eye that finds no object worth its constancy. Do you get what that means? Unfortunately, most men are ever changing like a joyless eye that finds no object worth its constancy. It means there ain't nothing in this world that's holding your attention. But the imaginative man, he is so in love with the end result that he remains faithful to it. Constant, then. Mrs. G.R. Now, she too had imaginatively heard what she wanted to physically hear and knew the outer world must confirm it. And this is her story. Some time ago, we advertised our home for sale, which was necessary for us to buy a larger property on which we had placed a deposit. Several people would have bought our home immediately, but we were obliged to explain that we could not close any deal until we learned whether or not our offer for the property we wanted had been accepted. Well, at this time, a broker called and literally begged us to allow him to show our home to a client of his who was eager for this location and would be glad to pay even more than we were asking. Mm. We explained our situation to the broker and to his client. They both stated they did not mind waiting for our deal to be consummated. The broker asked us to sign a paper, which he said was not binding in any way, but The broker asked us to sign a paper which he said was not binding in any way, but would give him first chance at the sale if our other deal went through. We signed the paper and learned that in California, real estate law, nothing, and we learned that in California real estate law, nothing could have been what? More binding. Dun, dun, dun. A few days later, our deal for the new property fell through, so we notified this broker, and his verbal response was, "Oh, just forget it." And 2 weeks later, he filed suit against us for $1,500 commission. Trial date was set, and we asked for a jury trial. Our attorney assured us he would do all he could, but that the law on this particular point was so stringent that he could not see any possibility of our winning the case. Then time for the trial arrived. My husband was in the hospital and could not appear with me in our defense. I had no witnesses, but the broker brought 3 attorneys and a number of witnesses into the court against us. Our attorney now told me we had not the slightest chance to win. I turned to my imagination, and this is what I did. Completely disregarding all that had been said by attorneys, witnesses, and the judge who seemed to favor the plaintiff, I thought only of the words I wanted to hear. Let me slide in real quick, because sometimes we think that we're the only ones. But she's telling you everybody was against her. But she stood 10 toes down and she said, here's what I want to hear. She said, in my imagination, I listened intently and heard the foreman of the jury say, "We find the defendant not guilty." I listened until I knew it was true. I closed my mind's ear to everything said in that courtroom and heard only those words. "We find the defendant not guilty." The jury deliberated from noon recess until 4:30 that afternoon. And all during those hours, I sat in the courtroom and heard those words over and over in my imagination. When the jurors returned, the judge asked the foreman to stand and give their verdict. The foreman stood up and said, "We find the defendant not guilty." Mrs. G.R. If there were dreams to sell, what would you buy? Oh. Would you not buy your wish fulfilled? Your dreams are without price and without money. By locking up the jury in her imagination, hearing only what she wanted to hear, she called the jury to unanimity. They were unanimous. She called them on her behalf to unanimity. Imagining being the reality of all that exists with it, the lady achieved her wish fulfilled. Now, Hebel's statement that the poet creates from contemplation is true of Imaginists as well. They know how to utilize their video audio hallucinations to create reality. Nothing is so fatal as conformity. We must not allow ourselves to be grit about by the ringed fixity of fact. Oh, you have no idea. Nothing, Angela, is so fatal as conformity. We must not allow ourselves to be grit about by the ringed fixity of fact. What's the ringed fixity of fact? The lawyers, the witnesses, the judge. That was the ringed fixity of fact. But we do not allow ourselves to conform to that. Change the image and thereby change the fact. Oh, jeepers. Change the image, thereby change the fact. What's the fact? The thing you see. I'm just scribbling notes on the paper for tomorrow morning. Don't you fret. Because it goes hand in hand with what we're going to talk about. R.O. employed the art of seeing and feeling to create her vision in imagination. Listen to what R.O. has to say. A year ago, I took my children to Europe. Oh, this is my favorite. Leaving my furnished apartment in the care of my maid. If you've been here a while, you know this story. Nothing will get your goat better than this one. When we returned a few months later to the United States, I found my maid and my furniture gone. The apartment superintendent stated that the maid had had my furniture moved by my request. There was nothing I could do at the moment. So I took my children and moved into a hotel. I, of course, reported the incident to the police and also brought in private detectives on the case. Both organizations investigated every moving company and every storage warehouse in New York City, but to no avail. Now, there seemed to be absolutely no trace of my furniture nor of my maid. And having exhausted all outside sources, I remembered your teaching. See, you're not the only one. She said, having exhausted all outside sources. How many of us do that? Push and push and push to try and fix it until we're exhausted. And then what do? I remembered your teaching and decided I would try using my imagination in this matter. So, while seated in my hotel room, I closed my eyes and imagined myself in my own apartment, sitting in my favorite chair and surrounded by all of my personal furnishings. I looked across the living room at the piano on which I kept pictures of my children. I would continue to stare at my piano until the entire room became vividly real to me. I could see my children's pictures and actually feel the upholstery of the chair in which, in my imagination, I sat. The next day, I came out of my bank. I turned to walk in the direction of my vacant apartment instead of towards my hotel. Creatures of habit, right? When I reached the corner, shoot, I discovered my mistake and was just about to turn back when my attention was drawn to a very familiar pair of ankles. Oh my. Yes, the ankles belonged to my maid. I walked up to her and took hold of her arm. She was quite frightened, but I assured her all I wanted from her was my furniture. I called a taxi, and she took me to the place in which her friends had stored my furnishings. In one day, my imagination had found what an entire big city police force and private investigators could not find in weeks. Remember what she said. I exhausted every external thing I could do. I hired private investigators. I employed the police, and nothing. They could find nothing. And what were her words? I remembered your teachings, and thus I turned to my imagination instead. You see what we do as humans? And that was signed by R.O. You see, this lady knew the secret of imagining before she called the police. But imagining, in spite of its importance, was forgotten. It was forgotten owing to attention being fixed on facts. Oh my God, my apartment is empty. My maid has absconded with all of my furniture, all of my belongings. Those were the cold, hard facts. But remember, we do not conform to cold, hard facts. We employ imagination. Hmm. However, what reason failed to find by force? Imagining found without effort. Ooh, Angela, say it again. What reason failed to find by force? Imagining found without effort. Nothing merely goes on, including the sense of loss, without its imaginal support. By imagining that she was seated in her own chair, in her own living room, surrounded by all of her own furnishings, she withdrew the imaginal support she had given to her sense of loss. And by this imaginal change, she recovered her lost furniture and reestablished her home. Your imagination is most creative when you imagine things as you desire them to be, building a new experience out of a dream of fancy. To build such a dream of fancy in her imagination, well, FG, she brought to play all of her senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, even taste. Oh, hold on, y'all. This is her story. Since childhood, I have dreamed of visiting faraway places. The West Indies, woo woo, particularly fired my fancy. And I would revel in the feeling of actually being there. Dreams are wonderfully inexpensive, and as an adult, I continued to dream my dreams, for I had no money or time to make them come true. Last year, I was taken to the hospital in need of surgery. I had heard your teaching, and while recuperating, had decided to intensify my favorite daydream while I had time on my hands. Oh, I actually wrote to the Alcoa steamship line asking for free travel folders and pored over them hour after hour, choosing the ship and the stateroom and the 7 ports I desired most to see. I would close my eyes and, in my imagination, would walk up the gangplank of that ship and feel the movement of water as the great liner pushed its way into free ocean. I heard the thud of waves breaking against the sides of the ship, felt the steaming warmth of a tropical sun on my face, and smelled and tasted salt in the air as we all sailed through blue waters. For one solid week confined to a hospital bed, I lived the free and happy experience of actually being on that ship. And then the day before my release from the hospital, I tucked the colored folders away and forgot them. 2 months later, I received a telegram from an advertising agency telling me I had won a contest. Well, get out. I remembered having deposited a contest coupon some months before in a neighborhood supermarket, but had completely forgotten the act. I had won first prize. And wonder of wonders, it entitled me to a Caribbean cruise sponsored by the Alcoa steamship line. But the wonder didn't stop there. The very stateroom I had imaginatively lived in and moved about in while confined to a hospital bed had been assigned to me. And to make an unbelievable story even more unbelievable, I sailed on the one ship I had chosen, which stopped in not one, but how many? All 7 ports I had decided to visit. Signed, FG. To travel is the privilege, not of the rich, but of the imaginative. Ooh, to travel is the privilege, not of the rich, but of the imaginative. But what did she say? She said she's always loved to travel, but she had no time and she had no money. But, she pulled a Dr. Joe Dispenza even before Dr. Joe Dispenza came about. She was laid up in a hospital bed, just like he was when he got run over. Laid up in a hospital bed with nowhere to go and nothing to do but to use the imagination. And that's what he did and knit his spine back together. Just telling you his story. Anyhow, there concludes chapter 5 and chapter 6 of The Law and the Promise. You see, so tonight, you have heard many stories. You have heard many stories. Funny, it's almost like reading the Bible because those have stories in it too. So what you gonna do? Are you going to apply what you've heard or argue about if it was real or not? Argue about whether it was in existence or not. You see, the Bible should be taken with the same thing. It is irrelevant if it is real or not. What is relevant is, can I apply it? So, whichever one of those stories you heard tonight, and if you didn't hear all of the ones, well, you're going to have to catch the replay. Which one moved you the most? Which one can you relate to the most? I'll see if I can cut it up. That would involve me editing. Don't worry, I will enjoy editing for you. I shall. Because I want you to have a beautiful experience. Listen, as I was hearing these stories as well, your girl got fired up because I have three, wait, three instances where I want to apply. You see, three problems, one solution. What's the solution? Imagining creates reality. What are the three steps? Because we're going to slide into the silence for 5 minutes, and you may as well use the silence productively. What are the three steps? Know what you want to become. She wanted to be a world traveler. He wanted to be a winner. They wanted to be homeowners. What do you want to be? You have to start there. So once you know what you want to become, he said, remember the guy in the record store? Do you have, and he heard the guy say, in his imagination, he heard him say, yes, yes, I do. She heard the jury, she heard the foreman say, we find the defendant not guilty. So, step one, know what you want to be. Step two, experience in imagination or rehearse in imagination what you would experience in reality. So, in reality, she would hear, we find the defendant not guilty. He would hear, yes, we do have it. Right? All of these stories are telling you exactly what to do. Know what you want, experience it in imagination, and then do what now? Feel the reality of it. Well, how are you going to feel the reality of it? Well, the first man who won at the racetrack, now I didn't say go gamble, because you do the same thing the same way every time we end up with a habit. Watch your step. But that's what he wanted. He wanted to win. He wanted to be a winner. And so what did he do? His tickets. He put them together in his hands. He felt them in his hands. They weren't there. They were here. They were not in his hands. But he used his sense of touch. The other two people used their sense of hearing. And you listen, she lost all her furniture. What did she imagine? Seeing her children's picture on the piano. She was in a hotel room where she was just sitting in a chair. And in her mind's eye, she sat in her favorite chair and she saw her beautiful children, heard their photos on that piano. But remember what she did. She said, "Ooh, I did everything I could on the outside, but then I remembered what you said. And after months of trying what I thought, I turned to yours and I remembered what you said that imagining creates reality, so I tested it out. And what the exterior could not bring about by force, imagination brought about without effort." This is what Neville says when he means you don't have to lift a finger to do it so, but you must imagine it to be so. But you don't just imagine it. He says, because I got to go back and find it because it was so poignant. I don't think I highlighted it. I don't think I highlighted it, but yes, I did. I did. After this, we will slide into the silence for 5 minutes. Imagining the wish fulfilled is the seeking that finds, the asking that receives, the knocking to which is open. Which means you don't imagine because, oh my God, I'm bored. You imagine because you know that what you imagine comes to pass. What you imagine with feeling, you feel the reality of it. Don't labor in vain. You don't eat that chocolate because, oh, maybe it'll taste good. No, you eat it. Listen, you've already tasted it in your mind's eye. That's why you want to eat it because you know it tastes good right here. So, whatever you imagine, feel the reality of it because it is real to you. And as within, so without. So, one more time. Real Ruby says, may the imagination be with you. Oh, I love it. Imagining the wish fulfilled is the seeking that finds, the asking that receives, the knocking to which is open. Let us slide into the silence for 5 minutes. Know what you want. Experience in imagination what you would be doing in reality. And allow the feeling of the reality of it, the knowing of it, to overtake you, make you feel goose pimples. Ooh, 5 minutes. And there concludes our 5 minutes of practice in that silent space. So, as we go to bed tonight, they always tell you will find your keys in the last place you look. Don't wait till you've exhausted everything. Start where you know you should start, and that is always within the imagination. Start there. Save yourself the time. Save your energy, right? Twitter is as Twitter does, but I see you, Real Ruby, Cyber, Wisdom Almighty, Shades of Shea, uh, and oh, Brandon, well, hello. Shea Butter, and Moon and Dolphin Duck, Miss Deborah, Flo Smiles, KZ, Matthias, oh, dearest Miss Fawn, and yes, darling, I am that deal. Thank you all for being here on such a beautiful evening. And I trust that you rest well. But most importantly, practice. What's the point of learning if we ain't gonna practice? So practice, 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 practice. Like the man, he was like, can I recreate what he did too? Well, let me try it out. And then he was like, nah, that's a coincidence. Let me do it again just to be sure. And he did it again. Oh, how will you know what you are made of unless you practice knowing what you want, experiencing or rehearsing in imagination what you said you wanted to become, and then immersing yourself in the feeling of the reality of it. Anywho, I'm already fired up. I can't get any too fired up because then the rooster's gonna get fired up and ain't nobody gonna sleep after that. So, anywho, I love you. And I'll see you on the morrow right here. YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, fanbase. Oh, yes, I'll see you in the morning, darlings. 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And listen, you want to be here for that one. Mm. If- You want to be here for that. Because I'm going to show you. Because you see, we all seem to think these laws are far-fetched. No. I'm going to show you how everything, it doesn't matter what man can invent, everything follows principle because it must. And when you understand it tomorrow, you'll look at life a little differently, with more boldness and more audacity. Anyhow, again, I've been saying good night for a while. I love you, and I will see you on the morrow. Mwah, my beautiful friends. Good night.